With everybody talking about World War III, one of the most common questions I'm seeing right now is how to get out of the draft. And on this video, I'm not going to tell you how to dodge the draft, but I'm going to go over 7 legitimate ways to get deferments. Let's jump right in with number 1, which is the educational deferment. You see, college students may be eligible to defer their draft to finish either the current semester or, if they're in their senior year, to go ahead and finish and graduate with that degree. And postponements may also be granted for students in certain advanced degree programs depending on the needs of the country at the time. Now, you see, the education deferment is actually what President Trump got deferred for the first, not once, not twice, but 4 times, according to official record. You see, he was a student at Fordham University, and then he transferred to the Wharton School of Business, and during this time, he received educational deferments 4 times for those studies. He was categorized as what's known as a 2S deferment, which is a common deferment during that time. These deferments legally postponed his eligibility as long as he remained in good academic standing. However, that still would have left him eligible for the draft after. So what happened next, you say? Well, that jumps right into number 2, which is medical deferments. You see, you still have to be eligible to serve in the military in order to be drafted. This is a common misconception that with the draft, they're going to say, boom! You're in, we don't care. You're in, we don't care. And just waive all the normal medical criteria. But that's just not the case. Now, the military they can be more lenient and more strict depending on recruiting needs on specific issues that are like gray area. For example, if you got drafted and you were missing a trigger finger, they would probably defer you. Or if you had, multiple knee surgeries or labrum surgeries or just issues that came up that were disqualifying. And I've already done videos on permanently disqualifying medical conditions, so if you want some of that information, you can go dig into it. But the bottom line is, if you are medically unfit for the military, while they may be a little bit more lenient come a draft, they're certainly not going to take somebody who would be a detriment to the fighting force, a detriment to themselves, or just physically incapable of completing the job. That's just not how this works. So you see, individuals with a physical or mental condition that would preclude them from service might be granted a permanent exemption. This is the one where President Trump gets the most flack, as people bring up bone spurs. And they're like, well, he played sports in college, so he obviously didn't have a problem until it came time for the draft. I'll tell you this, as a recruiter, I actually had 2 candidates who were disqualified from bone spurs, and one of them didn't even know that he had bone spurs. Both of these applicants had been students all the way through high school, college, and the issue with bone spurs is that depending on where they're at, they can be a risk, because if they break free and they cause damage, it would be like, while you're on the front lines, that could be very prohibitive to your platoon, your unit, whatever, right? Imagine you have a bone spur, say in your heel, that breaks off and it cuts your Achilles or it catches or whatever, right? I'm not a doctor, so I'm not trying to play the this is exactly what happens. But what I was explained as a recruiter is, if you have something like a bone spur that can become an issue down the road, they will most likely waive it, even if it's a non-issue right now. That's the same thing as, let's say, having a bee allergy, that as long as you have an EpiPen, you're totally fine. But they will still not let you in the service if it's that bad, because what if you don't have an EpiPen at the time you get stung front lines? And so there are issues like this that may not be an issue today or in daily life that come up, bone spurs being one of them. And so President Trump received a 5th deferment, this time a medical deferment for bone spurs, which was later turned into a permanent exemption because of, again, the medical history. Now, again, there are stipulations out there and ideas and I guess charges, or however you want to say it, that he dodged the draft using, a private doctor who may or may not have confirmed XYZ and gotten him out of the draft. But that's all hearsay unless you've actually read his medical file. And even then, how can you prove that what's in his medical file was not legit? And love him or hate him, you might feel some kind of way about this, but as we're going to show later on, he's definitely not the only person who got a educational or medical deferment, and the numbers will probably shock you to the number of deferments actually received during World War II and Vietnam. Now, the third way to get deferment is called a hardship deferment. This is classified as a 3-A or an III-A deferment, and this is true of, let's say you have very elderly parents and you're the caregiver, or you are a single parent with a child that depends specifically on you, or perhaps you're caretaking for a mentally disabled individual, or some kind of a legitimate hardship where you getting drafted will cause that familial unit undue stress. This is also referred to as a dependency hardship. Now, number 4 here is occupational deferments. You see, jobs that are deemed as like highly important to the US running as a whole are not going to be just completely drafted. Now, that will change depending on needs of the country. It may be different types of jobs. Some consistent ones seem to be things like agriculture, farming, essential, structure related jobs, or ministry, right? Being a religious person. And again, I'm not telling you that just having one of those jobs guarantees you a deferment, but those are historically some of the more common occupational deferments. And then minister and divinity students might be classified as a 4-D, which would be, again, a deferment due to an occupation. Number 5 is a family-based deferment. This is if you are the sole surviving son of a family that already lost a son in combat or in conflict. Let's say you have 3 children and 2 of them go off to war and they die. That's unfortunate. We hope that doesn't happen. But if you're the 3rd child, then you would be granted a deferment or could be granted a deferment because they don't want to take all of your heirs and send them off to war if they don't have to. And for anyone who gets triggered by this only applying to the surviving son, that's because the draft still only applies to men. So get over yourself. Now, the 6th deferment type is called a conscientious objector, and this is actually not a complete deferment. They have what's known as either an IO deferment, which means you could be placed in an essential civilian job, like drafted into a civilian job to help the US without going into the military, or an IAO deferment, which is where you would serve in the military but in a non-combat role, call it medic or religious personnel, something that would allow you to, again, still be a conscientious objector while still serving your country. And just in case you're unfamiliar, conscientious objector is like someone whose religious or moral beliefs preclude them from violence. And again, this is, I don't know the exact criteria here for being one of these people, but I do believe it's more than just saying, I don't agree. I think there's an actual documented process for this. I don't know. And still, it doesn't necessarily mean you get out of military service so much as just front lines combat. The 7th way to dodge the draft is through your age and or prior military service. Generally, they age out the draft at about 26 years of age. Now, again, that can be shifted depending on needs of the military and needs of the country and how bad the conflict is. But typically and historically, 26 has been about the age that the draft gets aged out. Just in case that's unclear, men age 18 to 25 are required to register for selective service, therefore the draft. And after that point, once you get to 26 and above, you may no longer be eligible for the draft at all. And if you served in the military honorably and have already been discharged, that may also, at least historically, defer you from the draft. So hey, you really want to get out of the draft? Enlist today. Haha. Now, again, important note here. The deferment rules, this is not set in stone. This can change. The president and Congress have the ability to amend draft depending on certain conflicts. So if the war or the conflict is big enough, they can loosen the reins on this a little bit to allow more people into the funnel. Because again, if a ton of people are getting deferred, they still need people on the front lines or in the military, and they have to be able to open those gates a little bit to meet those quotas. It's just how it works. That being said, take a guess real quick at what percentage of people were deferred in World War II. It's 70 to 75%. So during World War II, from the years of 1940 to 46, there were 50 million people who were registered for the draft. 10 million were inducted, and then 70 to 75% of those were exempted from the draft. The largest reason being medical exemptions, followed by industrial agricultural exemptions for jobs, and then family issues. And then below that, we had the educational deferment, which was actually quite rare for World War II. And then even below that, even rarer, was the conscientious objector. And for reference, 35 to 37 million men were not inducted, and the largest portion of that was because of medical reasons. Now, if you fast forward to the Vietnam draft, how many do you think that was? So the Vietnam draft was from 1964 to 73, and they drafted about 27 million people that were registered. And of that, 2.2 million were inducted with about a 57% deferment or exemption rate. Now, the interesting thing about the Vietnam War is that actually the largest deferment reason was not medical, it was educational deferments. And then, of course, below that, we had the normal ones, which again would be the most common are medical, family, job, and conscientious objector. So just to throw that back out there again, right? In World War II, 70 to 75% of people registered for the draft were deferred or exempted. And in Vietnam, it was around 57% of people. So I know there's this idea that if a draft comes, you're going, but realistically and statistically, that's just not the case. There are a lot of ways that you may still not be eligible for service. I mean, heck, if you start eating Twinkies now, you might just be so large that you'd be deferred for medical reasons. kind of joking there because that's a really unhealthy lifestyle decision, but like legitimately, there are reasons and ways to get out of the deferment that are legal depending on your actual situation. I wouldn't personally recommend against like self-sabotage or whatever in order to avoid the draft because there are other ways, but hey, you know, it is what it is. To each their own. So we briefly touched on the whole President Trump thing. I think I already answered that. Long, short, legally, he did everything right. He was not a draft dodger. However, there is still some like hearsay amongst what actually happened with his records and his exemption. And everybody's got their opinion. Whether you love or hate the guy, you're going to decide something that coincides with your belief. But the bottom line is this: there's no proof that he ever actually dodged the draft. So whether you believe that or not is irrelevant because it's impossible to prove, so it's just a null point. Now let's talk about women in the draft. And yes, I'm well aware that if I tell you women should be in the draft, it might get me canceled, and if I tell you women shouldn't be in the draft, it might get me canceled, so just take it all with a grain of salt, because I love women, and it is what it is. That said, personally, I don't believe that women should get drafted. However, I also did not believe that women should be front lines combat. And where I struggle here is that I don't believe those are mutually exclusive. I think that if the world has decided women are capable of exactly what men are in service and should have the exact same capabilities and responsibilities and complete equality in the military, i.e., if you want to be a Navy SEAL and you make it through training, you can be a Navy SEAL. If you want to be a Ranger, if you want to be infantry, if you want to be artillery, whatever. If the world has unilaterally decided that, probably not unilaterally, but has decided that, then my belief is they should probably also become eligible for the draft. Because you want equality, fair is fair. I'm not saying I believe that the women should be in the draft, but I also didn't necessarily agree with this. Take it or leave it. I am fine with either way the coin falls. What I'm not fine with is playing the game of the coin landing on its edge, where you get one half yes, one half no. It should be mutually exclusive. Either no service as infantry and no draft, or yes, full service, equality, and draft. That's my personal belief. Because you see, if you're not medically qualified as a female, you'd still be deferred. If you were a single mom, you'd still be deferred. If you had a family that relied on you, or your husband was at war, they would still defer you. You see, this would really only apply to an even smaller portion of the female population, because if you're a parent, like a mother, they would send your husband, not you. And if you're a single mother, then they wouldn't send you because you're a single mother. And so I don't really believe that it would be as much of a conflict as everyone says. But again, I don't necessarily believe that. I don't necessarily lean either way on either ideology. I just don't like the idea that we're pretending they're mutually exclusive issues, and I don't believe that they need to be. So I mean, yeah, in my thought process on this, either you believe that women are completely equal 100% across the board and genders should just not have any differences, in which case, then yes, logically, you would have to conclude that they should be drafted. Or you do not, and you believe there's a gender differentiation, in which case, perhaps they don't have the need to be in the same roles in the military. And again, I'm not saying either way because I see use cases for both sides, and I'm pretty damn neutral. And I have served with some amazing women in both garrison and combat situations in the military, and there are some absolute badass women out there. So this is not to denigrate them at all. I'm just saying, devil's advocate, you don't really get to have your cake and eat it too. Have your tea and drink it too, like however you want to say it. I don't, it is what it is. Cancel me. On that note, it's probably worth mentioning that there are already some penalties for dodging the draft. Failure to register could be up to 5 years in prison or a $250,000 fine. Falsifying information is a criminal charge and could probably end you in the exact category I was talking about as far as felony charges. Leaving the country would result potentially in prosecution and arrest when you come back, but that's fine. You don't have to come back. Half the country doesn't want you here anyway. And then ignoring induction notices would be considered draft evasion and subject to arrest as well. So look, at the end of the day, these are legitimate ways to avoid the draft and get deferred. There's a lot of them. If you fit into the category, go for it. If you feel the need and the call, serve your country. We love you for it. Don't just sit in the comments and troll and tell the whole world you're a coward. It's just a weird flex to be like, oh, I'm a draft dodger. Oh, I'm taking notes for draft dodging. Like the men of centuries past who have provided the blanket of freedom that you are sleeping under tonight, even your ancestors potentially, are just looking down on you, hanging their head and wondering, damn, that coward calls himself a man. That's just sad. So like, choose a side, stick to it, do the honorable thing, and stick to it. This middle ground, trolly, comment on the internet thing, whatever. Do me a favor, if you see this video and you see all those draft dodgy, wah coward peoples in the comments, tell them to make a choice or just comment shame, 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 and just let the world know, like, man, this guy, coward. If you're a proud supporter of the military, do us a favor, subscribe, share this video, show us some love so that we can continue our mission of helping service members and vets achieve financial freedom.